Unlikely Angel sounded amazing. This sounded exactly like my kind of film. And unfortunately, it did not work very well. This was released in 2022. It's directed by Durrell Nelson. It's written by Rebecca Rogers. And we have a cast including Jillian Murray as Janie. And at the start of the film, she is pregnant and she's very nervous about becoming a mother. Completely understandable. And then she's in a car accident. And the driver of the vehicle is actually an angel who has been sent down for divine intervention. And Janie then wakes up several years later. This is all at the beginning of the film. And her daughter, who she gave birth to at the beginning of the film, is now a much older child. And she's basically missed out on those early years, the years that she was panicking about. And, well, it's basically just about her getting on with her life years later. And I guess learning that she actually is okay with becoming a mother to a young baby and is finding it easier to deal with those emotions. In theory, that's kind of the lesson here. And honestly, it's terrible for multiple reasons. I love the overarching concept, but it's so horrendously executed. First of all, the pacing is terrible. We barely get any time to get to know Janie's fears and anxieties. It's not so much that the crash happens in the first scene or anything, but it feels very, very rushed. And it would have made more sense if she hadn't had the baby. Because we basically start the film, she's pregnant, she has the baby, and then the crash happens, and then she wakes up several years later after being in a coma. And it would have made more sense if she just found out she was pregnant, or maybe she was getting towards the end of her due date, or coming up to her due date rather, and the anxiety was heightened because of one of those reasons. But other than that, the pacing just doesn't make a lot of sense. The emotions don't feel very believable with that particular moment in time. So the rest of the film doesn't make any sense because we haven't had the chance to get to know those genuine fears. And then the rest of the film is 100% unrealistic. And I don't mean unrealistic in the sense that it wouldn't happen, because I'm very spiritual. And I completely bought into that part of the narrative of divine intervention. I have absolutely no problems with that. However, it's either very weak or a little bit too over the top. And what I'll mean by that is that if you're looking for a film with a strong religious message, with some really great divine intervention story, then this is very weak. I don't think they lent into it anywhere near as much as they could have done. However, if you're just looking for a film about somebody who is in a coma and gets a chance to see things from a different perspective, there are many films like that that don't have a religious aspect, and you don't want the religious aspect. There is too much religion in this that you can't ignore it. So there's enough that they've tried to put it in there, and you can't escape it if you aren't religious and you won't like that part of it, I understand. But if you're looking for a religious film, it's very weak. So it's kind of in the middle. They haven't hit the mark, but there's too much of it that people who aren't religious and don't want those messages will find it irritating. So they've done a very poor job with that part of it. The actual character of Janie is completely unbelievable. Her actions unbelievable after coming out of the coma, and it's too lighthearted. That's not to say it couldn't have lighthearted moments, but they either needed to not make it that serious, and you can't really do that with a religious film. You do need to have more serious elements to take the story seriously, or they needed to make it a hard-hitting drama, and that would have been better. But they don't do that. It's too lighthearted. It's not serious enough, but it's not so lighthearted that it's a comedy. So they haven't got the message right. They haven't got the tone right. The actual events of the narrative are completely unrealistic. Janie's actions are completely unbelievable. And the setting up, the start of the story, the pacing is absolutely terrible. To try and find some positives, I guess the performances are okay. The camera works fine. The lighting is fine. I didn't really pay attention to the music, but I guess that's a good thing because it didn't annoy me or anything. It's unfortunately a really terrible film with a really fantastic premise. Maybe in the right hands, it could have been an absolutely amazing experience. If they ever want to remake this down the line, I will absolutely watch it. But unfortunately, every aspect, apart from the technical aspects, I guess, of An Unlikely Angel were very, very poorly handled. And it's a shame because this absolutely is my kind of film. Maybe one would argue my hopes were too high, but I would argue that it's just a very weak film. It had potential. It sounded amazing. The pacing was terrible to begin with. The narrative is very unrealistic. Janie's actions are very unrealistic. The messages are very weak. And as I said, there's either not enough religion in it for it to feel like a religious film about the power of divine intervention, or there's too much religion in it for somebody who doesn't want to think about religion but likes the idea of looking at things from a different perspective and changing your view of something and having that alternative chance to see things further down the line. So it's not a good film. The messages are weak. The religion is not well handled. The characters are fine. I don't dislike Janie. I just don't believe her. I don't think she's a well-written character. Unfortunately, An Unlikely Angel, as amazing as it sounded, was terribly executed. And because of that, I really unfortunately cannot recommend it. If they ever remake it, I will absolutely watch it. But I don't recommend An Unlikely Angel.